Welcome to the Swing Trading with Cycles channel. This is January 8th, 2023. We're going to cover uranium today. So we have the first full week of 2023 complete. People are saying uranium is breaking out. Is that true? I guess first off, I'll say breakout is a little bit of a vague term, so we'll get to specifics. So we're going to talk about what that means. We'll look at a ratio chart really quickly, and then we'll look at individual names, the ones that we usually run through. Take a look for a pinned comment that'll have a link to previous videos and also some other helpful background material like Cycles 101, understanding swing lows and swing highs, because we're going to talk about all this stuff, and it's helpful for you to have that background. If you need to take a deep dive, maybe then rewatch the video, kind of understand things a little bit deeper. So this is a chart of URA on the left. And on the right-hand side, this is URA divided by SPY, the S&P 500 ETF. And you can see it's actually very similar, right? It's been kind of down only since 2011 for the absolute chart, and really essentially the same thing for the ratio chart. And it's been building this little bull flag here after bottoming. So on the ratio chart, that's 2020, March 2020. And on the absolute chart, it's the same thing. So they both bottomed. So basically, if URA is essentially like the ratio of its underperformance to SPY bottomed at the same time that it bottomed itself, which is another way of saying it kind of rocketed out of this low. Because what is our percent gain, right? Like it just totally outpaced the market, not even from the Pico bottom, but like 270%, right? So we've been consolidating here. This is your absolute chart, and this is your ratio chart. And this is the important thing I would draw one's eye to. We have a swing low. As I said in that pinned comment, we'll talk in great detail about what swing lows are, why they are important. The TLDR is that's how a bottom forms. Every single bottom there has ever been, ever will be, is a swing low. Doesn't mean every swing low is a bottom, but every bottom is a swing low. Incredibly important to understand. So by crossing above the high of this candle that marks a low, we made a swing low here. Now, it's also important to note that this is a higher low compared to this one, for instance. But also important that we're still inside this consolidation box you can kind of think of, right? Like we need to, I'll purposely not make it go all the way to the wicks because we obviously poked above this 3 months in a row. These are monthly charts, by the way, and just came back, couldn't do it, did it again. So clearly there's a lot of selling up here, right? And so we're not even near that level here yet. And so we still have a little bit of ways to go. But right now we're starting to see outperformance. I mean, very clearly, just on really, really basic level, January, uranium, the ETF is doing better than SPY so far, right? Because it's green. And we'll look at the absolute charts in more detail, but we're a hair's whisker away from making a new high on the month and creating a swing low in absolute terms, right? Like if we're able to, and this is a pattern we'll probably see in many uranium miners, right? So the high from last month was 2168. So if we can trade above 2168 and we closed here at 2117, so if we can get about 50 cents above here, that would make this month a swing low, which is actually a higher low, just like on the ratio chart versus this. So that's helpful. I mean, really, this has just been a massive kind of consolidation. Obviously not fun if you got trapped in here trading this kind of churning. It is a downtrend though, but it's just not like a sort of waterfall. So so the short answer of is uranium breaking out? It depends on if you define a breakout as beginning to outperform the S&P 500, then yes, absolutely. And more importantly, we'll look at the weekly chart. That's the most relevant because we're thinking about the weekly cycle. For the URA ETF, we'll zoom in here. We just closed week 2, right? So next week coming up is going to be week 3. This appears to be your ICL right there, right? And when you think about what that means for the daily cycle, that also just important to note, every weekly cycle low is also a daily cycle low. So it's helpful to find that, right? So this is your daily chart. This is your daily cycle low that marked that weekly cycle low. So what day are we on? That gives us a sense. This is day 11. So that's helpful to know about, right? So we're going to start day 12 on Monday. Now, we're going to watch this because every rally comes to an end, right? At some point, we're going to get kind of long in the tooth, right? Assuming we don't roll over early in the first place. And so you're going to want to watch this. So this is this huge green candle, like, and that's another way I guess you can say a breakout. I mean, look at this, like, ugly sort of churning. It is moving higher, and this is, so in the same way that that bigger picture was a downtrend, but it was ugly. This is an uptrend that's ugly, right? Like, you're just kind of churning here, but then you have this big move, so you could call this a breakout as well. Now we need follow through. It looks like 22 would be kind of the next area that marks this swing high here, but ultimately you want a test of this local low. But because it's only day 11 of the daily cycle, you're in pretty good shape, right? Like, you think about this rally lasted 21 days, right? This rally lasted, well, that one was 13 days. So that's an important, like, warning sign. That lasted 18 days. So it doesn't mean it has to last an exact amount of time that one of these previous ones did. This just gives you a kind of frame of reference, a ballpark. So at 11 days, we're not early. It's not like we're catching, this is like day 1 or 2, but in our previous video, we talked about it. So there was time to get long. I'm personally long UEC, which we'll look at, because that was actually showing the clearest signs of a potential ICL, like, early. And so let's look at the Sprott Uranium ETF. This thing is a monster. Like, look what it's doing. Let's look at the monthly chart. Look what it's doing on this monthly chart. Now, important to note, these are swing highs that we need to get above, right? That's important. I mean, really, you can think of this whole level like as being kind of a ceiling. So that's up here around 13.30. We're down here at $12.30. Look how much higher we are above this monthly high, right? That's a big, nice swing low. Now, really important to note, these are monthly candles, and we have a lot of month to trade, so things can change, right? This green candle could go red, right? We got to pull back. This could become a massive upper wick, and that could happen to any of these candles. Really important to note that, right? And on the weekly level, we really made our low actually on the week of December 5th at 1047. These were higher lows. That was a low at 1054. That was a low at 1050, right? And so, I mean, this was obviously a lower low than this, but it didn't break this low, right? Came within pennies. And you have these two big up weeks, which is causing that big monthly candle. So again, you can see the level on the weekly chart. We have to get above that big candle. That said, the miners haven't necessarily traded with the price of uranium quite as much as you might have expected, but still obviously good to see uranium green, right? So let's look at URNM. Yep, so it's week 2, similar to URA we talked about. And again, just having a quick frame of reference, it is day 12 of its daily cycle, so that's important to be aware of. And so at this point, it's a low risk long, right? And you're also looking for other key levels are the monthly last month's high. So URNM, that is $34.29, right? For URA, that is $21.68. So again, if you weren't long anything from before when we started this little daily cycle, it's not too late, I wouldn't think. And obviously the broader market has to cooperate as well, which it kind of seems like it has been. Let's look at CCJ. So this looks a lot like the Sprott. I think it made its low on the week of December 5th, right? So 21.33, 21.36. Oh no, so it did make a lower low on the week of December 19th. So it's similar to some of the other names. So it's does that make that week 27? Let's see. Week 25, yep. Okay, so that is so this is week 2 as well. So similar to URA. And again, so for CCJ, the high from last month is 24.74. We're actually pretty close to that. Let's look at some of these other names. Let's go to UEC, because we did kind of draw like a little cycle projection, right? So it's week 3 in this case, right? Because this one had made it much clearer. Like, boom, we have a bottom. Right, we got this swing low once we crossed above that. Then we got follow through. We got this pretty massive dip, broke this low and all. This was a red candle at one point, but then we had a massive reversal. So my expectation was, like, if you're even, especially playing in this conservatively, maybe we don't even get out of this consolidation box. We just get up to here at $4.60 in that neighborhood, and we top out and call that week 5. So this is week 3. We're going to start week 4 next week. And so that gives you just a couple more weeks of upside. This is not a prediction by any means. It's just a scenario I'm preparing for if this is a bearish cycle. along with like just that we're moving into a longer term cycle low. Obviously, it's possible that that longer term cycle low is behind us, and that would be great. So we'll continue to look for evidence of that as well. And in terms of the daily cycle, we are on day 13. Is this a high? So that's 394. That's 393. So we still need to make a high above the high from day 10. But we're going to be starting day 14. So not super early, not super, so a little bit more advanced in the daily cycle because it bottomed earlier, essentially. And you can see we had this swing high situation and then this kind of bullish reversal. Now it's going to be a question: can we get up? Can we get up above there? But we are getting later in the weekly cycle, in the daily cycle. If we can look at other rallies, this one lasted 23 days. This was a short one, just 7. Yikes. What about this one? That was 19. So that starts to give you a little bit of a picture of, okay, you just don't want to overstay your welcome. That was 11 days. Interesting. Okay. So we'll definitely be watching that closely to make sure, because again, you just never know when a daily cycle decline becomes a weekly cycle decline. And obviously, you want to just kind of get out ahead of that. What else? Let's also look at Fission 3.0. This one is pretty bullish. Had a very bullish catalyst, I should say. I mean, already made a move from like 6 cents all the way up here to where it is around 20. Where did it close at 29 cents? But notice it started a new daily cycle, so it made a high on day 26, and that's important. As this breakout was happening, it's important to note, like, okay, this is the swing low that the rally started off of, right? So it was still relatively early here in the daily cycle, and we did get some more push through. But of course, as everything ends eventually, right? And so we got our top on day 26. Didn't even get that long of a decline. What was that, right? Like just like 6 days. And then we made a swing low, and now, I mean, look at this little uptrend that started here. Just to be clear, right? Boom. And now we're doing this, and I expect something like that, right? So this thing could go to $1 easily. Also, low market cap. Let's see. What is the market cap? Well, relatively low. It's obviously appreciated a lot since 5 cents. It's about 89 million. But this one is the one that I'm watching. But again, this day 9 high is the high so far. So it's day 11. We're going to be starting day 12 on Monday. And so we really do need to get above that level for the uptrend to kind of continue. But you can really define your risk here, kind of very, very clear levels. If we think about where we are in the weekly cycle, this is week 9. And so that's important to note, right? Like, how much more time do you think we have, right, in a sort of weekly rally? This is obviously also thinking about the context that the other uranium names are earlier in the weekly cycle. So maybe that actually gives this thing fuel to run for a little bit longer. Will be interesting to watch. But again, there are clear levels. You don't have to use hope. And let's look at what the monthly. Yeah, I mean, look at that monthly. Nice and bullish. So next is really this kind of cluster above, right, essentially 34 cents is going to be the next area we're going to need to kind of clear to get into like the next kind of level. And so that is Fission 3.0. Let's also look at UROY, and we'll look at Denison as well. So UROY looks to be in week 2. Yep, week 2 of a new weekly cycle. That's a big bullish hammer-like candle. But again, just a reminder, you can see that monthly consolidation box. It has a lot of work to do to get out of it. And in fact, it's just it's an inside month inside a big range. So last month's high is at 295 and we're down here at 248. So that's a good amount of upside just in terms of percentages without even having to, necessarily get out of the range. And if we think about where we are in the daily cycle, looks like this last one ended on day 31. We are on day 12. So again, important to note, it's not early, but it's also not late, right? So you don't necessarily need to feel like you're chasing. Although I will say the broader market needs to remain bullish for this thing to work, is my guess, or for these names to work in general. Fission Uranium, and not to be confused with Fission 3.0, looking quite bullish here. So we can see this one had a bit of a different pattern than the others. You saw this top here, right? And let's just kind of quantify that, right? So that looks like that's that. So that's an interesting move here, right? Because it looks like this is your cycle low here on week 17, and then you have this other rally for 4 weeks, this decline, and this is a big reversal. So we're gonna have to watch this. This is an interesting kind of turn of events. I guess you could just say this is all one big cycle of 25 weeks, and this is a nice big higher low, very bullish. So that's interesting. And then if you look at the monthly chart, very, very bullish. This is setting up for, well, I was going to say a bullish outside month, but not quite. But just like everything else, it needs to get back above last month's high, which is $73. So about 74 cents, essentially. So another 10 cents up from here, which is a decent sized move for a 64 cent name, obviously. And then looking at next and thinking about, let's think about the daily cycle for this guy, right? Like where are we? Wow, that's interesting. So this looks like it might be relatively early in a new daily cycle. Interesting. That's why it's really important to look at multiple time frames, because when one isn't super clear, another might be clearer. So it looks like this thing topped out on week 18, or day 18, excuse me. This is our daily chart now. This is fission uranium. And then we declined into a low on day 39. So that's a really long cycle, more or less, right? So we kind of declined for about as much time as we rallied, right? This, like, you can, an easy way of thinking about this is it's just, from swing low to swing high to swing low, right? That's our cycle. So that would put us on day 1, 2, 3, 4. So Monday would be starting day 5. So this is actually a pretty nice risk reward one here, because that would make you really early in a daily cycle, and early in a new sort of weird weekly cycle that made a much higher low. This is probably one of the more interesting looking ones. Yeah. So maybe this is your cycle low, a week 25. That's just a much higher low. Like, price could not fall. It was trying to. Wouldn't it be an interesting week? Wouldn't it be a really important week to this coming week to see if we get follow through on these breakouts, or at the very least bullish consolidation, so like not a collapse. And let's look at next gen as our last one. So next gen, same picture as most of them. In this case, it's week 3 of the weekly cycle. So we're relatively early in the weekly cycle, basically around the middle of a new daily cycle. So definitely we'll want to tread lightly. Oh yeah, let's look at Denison and UUU before we wrap up. I know those are popular ones. Right, so the question was, where are we going? We've been coiling like crazy, and this is a nice bullish candle so far. Still, we're still kind of, there's like a lid on this thing like right here, but good odds now that it's at least going to test that upper end of the range. And on the monthly, yep, still consolidating here, right? Like just coiled. The high from last month is at $1.24. So basically, getting that new high will also get you a test of this kind of area to see if you can make another, see if you can kind of test that, right? So getting through 130 is your gateway to like 150. So that's not a bad risk reward, right? Like that 20 cents of upside, if you can set a stop that makes sense at like a logical pivot on a lower time frame. So that's the uranium update. Relatively, not super early in a new daily cycle, but not late either, so not a bad entry. And relatively early in a new weekly cycle, as long as the broader market doesn't collapse, definitely some good upside here. I particularly like UEC, Fission 3.0, and especially Fission Uranium I have my eye on now. So that's our update. We'll leave it at that. That's uranium looking good right here on our, about to start the second week of 2023.